She asked you a question yesterday. You answered it. Everything seemed normal. But 20 minutes later, she asked you the exact same question again, just phrased differently. You thought she forgot. You thought she wasn't paying attention. You answered again and moved on with your day. You missed the most important signal a woman can send. And I'm going to show you exactly what it means. I'm here at Apex Masculine Mind, and what I'm about to share comes from 6 years of studying behavioral psychology and analyzing over 300 real conversations where men completely misread female investment. This isn't theory. This is pattern recognition that changes everything. The question was never about getting information. She already had your answer. What she wanted was something completely different. And until you understand what that something is, you'll keep missing women who are already emotionally locked into you. Let me tell you about Marcus. 28 years old, software engineer, dating a woman named Claire for about 5 weeks. Things were casual, nothing defined. One Tuesday afternoon, Claire texted him asking what his plans were for the weekend. Marcus said he might visit his brother upstate, still figuring it out. She said, "Cool, have fun." Thursday comes. Claire asks again, "What's happening this weekend?" Marcus, slightly confused, reminds her he mentioned his brother. She responds with, "Oh, right, forgot." Friday night, she brings it up again in person. "So you're definitely going upstate?" Marcus thought she had memory issues. He laughed it off. He never understood what was actually happening in that moment. Claire wasn't forgetting. Claire was fishing. And that fishing behavior revealed something she would never say directly. Robert Greene teaches us that people communicate their desires through indirect methods when direct admission feels too vulnerable. The more important something is to them, the more they disguise the inquiry. When a woman asks you the same question multiple times, she's not checking facts. She's checking her position in your priority structure. Claire wanted to know if Marcus would adjust his weekend for her. She wanted to see if he'd invite her. She wanted confirmation that she mattered enough to influence his decisions. But she couldn't ask that directly, because direct questions give you power. Indirect repetition gives her information without exposing her investment. This is what Machiavelli understood about human nature. We reveal ourselves through what we return to. The topics we circle back to are the topics holding emotional weight. Most men hear the words and miss the pattern. The pattern is everything. Here's what makes this signal so reliable. When someone genuinely forgets information, they accept your answer the second time without additional probing. When someone is emotionally invested, they keep returning because they're not seeking information. They're seeking reassurance about their importance to you. Schopenhauer wrote that human beings are driven by will, not reason. Our deepest desires push through our carefully constructed rational exteriors. A woman's will wants confirmation of your emotional availability to her. Her reason tells her not to ask directly, so the will finds another path. Repeated questions, slight variations, different angles toward the same core concern. After Claire asked the third time, Marcus finally picked up on something. He said, "You really want to know about this weekend, huh?" She laughed it off. Said she was just making conversation, but her body language shifted. She became quieter, more distant. That shift confirmed everything. Jung called this the shadow, the parts of ourselves we can't acknowledge consciously. Claire's shadow held her attachment to Marcus. Her conscious mind couldn't admit she cared whether he invited her upstate, but her shadow kept pushing the question forward, hoping he'd read between the lines. Most men, when they notice the repetition, make one of 2 mistakes. First mistake, they get annoyed. They think she's not listening. They respond with frustration or sarcasm. "I already told you this. Were you even paying attention?" This destroys the dynamic immediately, because she experiences shame for revealing her investment, even indirectly. Second mistake, they over-explain. They give longer answers, more details, thinking clarity will satisfy her. But she doesn't need more information. She needs emotional confirmation. More explanation without addressing the underlying need just makes her feel misunderstood. The correct response requires you to see what's beneath the question. When she asks the third time, you don't answer the surface question. You address the real one. Marcus could have said, "Sounds like you're trying to figure out if I want you there." Claire would have either denied it playfully or admitted it directly. Either way, a subtext becomes text. You've shown her you can read her, which builds attraction, and you've given her the opportunity to be honest, which builds trust. Cialdini's research on influence shows that people feel connected to those who understand them without requiring explicit explanation. When you demonstrate the ability to read her emotional subtext, you're proving social intelligence. That intelligence is magnetic because it promises she won't have to perform or pretend with you. Let me give you 3 more examples so you can recognize this pattern in your own life. First example. You mention you're grabbing coffee with a friend. She asks where. You tell her. 2 hours later, she asks what time you're meeting. You tell her. Next day, she asks how the coffee was. Then she asks what you talked about. Each question seems innocent alone. Together, they reveal surveillance. She's tracking your time and attention. That tracking only happens when someone feels their access to you isn't guaranteed. Guaranteed access doesn't require monitoring. Uncertain access demands it. Her questions are emotional reconnaissance disguised as casual interest. Second example. She brings up the same story from her past multiple times. Her ex, her family, her job, whatever. You've heard it. You've responded. But she keeps returning to it with slight variations. Most men think she's boring or repetitive. Wrong. She's testing whether your response changes. She wants to see if you'll react differently now that you know her better. She wants confirmation that you remember. She wants evidence that her stories matter enough to stick in your mind. Repetition is her way of measuring your investment through your consistency. Third example. She asks hypothetical questions repeatedly. What would you do if I moved cities? If I changed careers? If I needed help with something? These aren't idle curiosities. They're scenario planning. She's mapping your loyalty across different futures because she's already placing you in those futures mentally. Nietzsche said that everything we do is a confession. Every repeated behavior confesses a hidden priority. When a woman returns to the same questions, she's confessing that you've become a variable in her emotional calculations. You're no longer peripheral. You're central, even if she hasn't admitted that centrality to herself yet. Here's the psychology that most dating advice completely misses. Women are taught from childhood that direct pursuit is unattractive, that desperation repels, that need is weakness. So investment must be concealed. It must be coded. Repeated questions are one of the primary codes. The reason this signal is so powerful is because it's involuntary. She can control whether she texts you first. She can control whether she initiates plans. She can control her tone and her availability. But she cannot fully control her curiosity about you. Curiosity leaks through repetition. Daniel Kahneman's work on cognitive biases shows that we return to thoughts that carry emotional significance. Our minds prioritize processing information that affects our well-being. If you've become significant to her well-being, her mind will prioritize processing information about you. That processing manifests as repeated inquiries. Let me walk you through what's happening in her mind during these repeated questions. Conscious level. She's asking for information. Subconscious level. She's seeking emotional reassurance. She wants to know you're thinking about her. She wants to know she has influence over your choices. She wants to know that her presence in your life isn't replaceable. But here's the trap. If you give her that reassurance too directly, you lose the tension that created her investment. If you say, yes, you matter to me, yes, I'm prioritizing you. Yes, you're special. You've collapsed the mystery. Mystery creates pursuit. Certainty creates comfort. comfort can kill attraction. So the advanced move isn't to answer her real question directly. It's to acknowledge you see it without rewarding it fully. When she asks the same thing again, you smile. You say, "You're keeping close track of me." Not accusatory, not mocking, just observational. You've held up a mirror to her behavior without punishing her for it. This does something psychologically crucial. It shows awareness without judgment. It demonstrates that you understand female communication operates on multiple levels. And it subtly confirms that, yes, you see her investment, which gives her partial satisfaction without giving her total security. Balthasar Gracian wrote that the art of worldly wisdom is knowing when to reveal and when to conceal. You reveal enough to keep her engaged. You conceal enough to keep her curious. The repeated question is her attempt to extract more revelation from you. Your job is to give her just enough to feel seen, not enough to feel certain. Let's talk about timing. The repetition pattern typically emerges between week 3 and week 8 of knowing someone. Before week 3, she's still evaluating. After week 8, if investment exists, it's usually more obvious. But that 3 to 8 week window is where emotional attachment begins to form, while social conditioning still demands she hide it. During this window, watch for 3 specific repetition patterns. First pattern, logistical repetition. She asks about your schedule, your plans, your availability multiple times across multiple days. This means she's trying to find overlap. She's trying to position herself into your time without directly asking for it. Second pattern, historical repetition. She asks about your past, your relationships, your family, your choices more than once. This means she's building a psychological profile. She's trying to understand what shaped you because she's evaluating compatibility for something longer term. Third pattern, hypothetical repetition. She poses future scenarios, value questions, moral dilemmas repeatedly. This means she's testing alignment. She's checking whether your worldview matches hers in areas that matter for sustained connection. All 3 patterns share one thing. They reveal that she's moved beyond surface attraction into evaluation for emotional investment. Surface attraction doesn't require this much information gathering. Deep investment does. Freud understood that repetition compulsion reveals unresolved psychological needs. When we repeat behaviors, we're trying to master something we haven't mastered yet. Her repeated questions are attempts to master her uncertainty about your feelings. She hasn't mastered it because you haven't given her complete clarity, which is precisely what keeps her engaged. Now let me address the elephant in the room. Some of you are thinking, this sounds manipulative. If she wants to know something, why not just tell her? Here's why. Because premature clarity kills the natural selection process that leads to genuine compatibility. When you reveal everything immediately, you remove her ability to choose you based on discovered information. Discovery creates ownership. People value what they work to understand. When she pieces together your character through observation and inquiry, she feels like she earned that knowledge. Earned knowledge creates deeper investment than given knowledge. This isn't manipulation. This is allowing natural psychological processes to unfold. Manipulation would be lying or creating false scarcity. What I'm describing is simply not collapsing tension prematurely. There's a massive difference. Epictetus taught that we should focus on what we can control and accept what we cannot. You cannot control whether she invests emotionally. You can control whether you create the conditions where investment is possible. Maintaining some mystery, not answering every question immediately, giving her space to wonder, these are conditions that allow investment to grow. Let me give you a real example of how this plays out. I coached a guy named David last year. He was seeing a woman named Rachel. 3 weeks in, Rachel started asking him the same questions repeatedly. What's your relationship with your mom? What made your last relationship end? What do you want long term? David's instinct was to give her complete answers every time. He thought transparency built trust. And he's partially right. Transparency does build trust. But total transparency too early builds boredom. I told David to try something different. Next time Rachel asked a repeated question, acknowledge the pattern. Say, "You've asked me that before. Curious why it's on your mind again." This flips the script. Now she has to examine her own behavior. Now she has to get closer to admitting her investment. Rachel responded exactly as predicted. She laughed, got slightly defensive, then admitted she wanted to make sure she understood him correctly. That admission, that tiny confession that she wanted to make sure she understood him, was the crack in the facade. David didn't push. He just said, "I appreciate that," and moved the conversation forward. But the dynamic shifted. Rachel felt seen, which deepened her trust and her investment. Here's what most men don't realize. Women are extraordinarily attuned to being misunderstood. Past relationships, friendships, family dynamics have taught them that most people don't actually listen. Most people don't actually see them. So when you demonstrate that you not only hear her words, but understand the motivations beneath them, you separate yourself from 90% of men immediately. Sun Tzu wrote that if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. In the context of attraction, the enemy is miscommunication. If you know how she actually communicates, which is indirectly, and you know how to respond, which is with calibrated awareness, you don't fear losing her to misunderstanding. Let's go deeper into the psychology of why women communicate this way. Socialization plays a role, but it goes beyond that. There's an evolutionary component. David Buss's research on mating psychology shows that women evolved to be more selective because the cost of poor mate selection was historically much higher for them. That selectiveness requires information gathering without revealing full interest too early. Why? Because revealing full interest before you've properly evaluated someone gives them power over you before you know if they're worthy of that power. Repeated questions allow information gathering while maintaining plausible deniability about investment level. This is why when you call out the repetition gently, many women will deny it or laugh it off. The denial isn't dishonesty. It's protection. She's protecting herself from vulnerability until she's more certain of your character and your intentions. Now here's where this gets really interesting. The repeated question isn't just a sign of her investment. It's also a test of your awareness. She's subconsciously checking whether you're socially intelligent enough to read subtext. Men who can't read subtext feel emotionally illiterate to women. Men who can feel like they speak her language. Jung talked about the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects within each person. A man who can access his anima, his intuitive understanding of emotional undercurrents, becomes far more attractive because he bridges the communication gap most men never even recognize exists. When she asks you the same question, and you respond with awareness instead of annoyance or obliviousness, you're demonstrating integrated masculine energy, strength that doesn't require dominance, confidence that doesn't require control, presence that doesn't require performance. Let me show you exactly how to respond in 4 different scenarios. Scenario 1. She asks about your weekend plans 3 times across 3 days. Wrong response. Irritation or robotic repetition of the same answer. Right response. 3rd time you say, "Seems like you want to be part of those plans. Should we do something?" Direct, confident, and it addresses her real concern. Scenario 2. She brings up your ex-girlfriend multiple times in different conversations. Wrong response. Detailed explanations or defensiveness. Right response. You notice that topic keeps coming up. What are you actually trying to figure out? This puts the focus on her underlying curiosity, not your past. Scenario 3. She asks hypothetical questions about commitment, future, values repeatedly. Wrong response. Treating each question as isolated and giving generic answers. Right response. These questions tell me you're thinking about where this is going. I am too. Let's talk about it when you're ready. This validates her thought process without forcing immediate definition. Scenario 4. She asks about your day, your mood, your energy multiple times when nothing has changed. Wrong response. Short, dismissive answers that make her feel annoying. Right response. I'm good, same as an hour ago. But I like that you're checking on me. This acknowledges the pattern while appreciating the care behind it. Notice what all 4 responses have in common. They name the pattern. They address the emotional subtext. They maintain your frame without dismissing hers. This is the balance that creates attraction and trust simultaneously. Schopenhauer believed that we suffer when we want something we don't have. Her repeated questions are a form of suffering. She wants certainty about your feelings, but she doesn't have it yet. Your awareness of her suffering, without immediately ending, it maintains the tension. Your kindness in how you acknowledge it maintains the connection. This might sound cold. It's not. It's realistic. Attraction requires some level of uncertainty. Relationships that begin with total transparency and immediate commitment often lack the depth that comes from gradual revelation. You're not withholding to be cruel. You're allowing natural pacing. Here's a key distinction. There's a difference between healthy mystery and manipulative deception. Healthy mystery is not revealing everything at once while remaining honest about what you do share. Manipulative deception is lying or intentionally creating false impressions. Never confuse the two. Robert Greene teaches that seduction is about creating emotional experiences, not logical arguments. When she asks repeated questions and you respond with awareness, you're creating an emotional experience of being understood. That experience bonds her to you far more than any perfect answer to her surface question ever could. Now let's talk about what happens if you miss this signal entirely. If you treat every repeated question as a simple request for information, you're training her to believe you don't understand her. Over time, she'll feel increasingly alone in the relationship, even if you're physically present. This is how many relationships deteriorate. She keeps sending signals through indirect communication. He keeps missing them because he's only listening to words, not patterns. Eventually, she concludes he'll never truly see her, and she withdraws. He's blindsided because from his perspective, he answered every question she asked. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The repeated question feels like an impediment, an annoyance, a redundancy. But it's actually the way forward. It's your opportunity to demonstrate depth of understanding that most men never achieve. I want to pause here and address something important. Some men hear this information and think, great, now I have a formula. I'll just respond this way every time, and I'll get the result I want. That's missing the entire point. Formulas don't work in human connection because human beings detect inauthenticity instantly. What I'm teaching you isn't a script, it's a lens. A way of seeing female communication that allows you to respond authentically from understanding rather than confusion. Dostoevsky wrote that the best way to keep a prisoner from escaping is to make sure he never knows he's in prison. Most men are imprisoned by their inability to read indirect communication. They don't even know they're missing entire layers of conversation. Once you see the prison, you can walk out of it. But you have to genuinely see it, not just memorize escape routes. Here's what genuine understanding looks like. You're in conversation with a woman you've been seeing for a month. She asks where you see yourself in 5 years. You answer. 3 days later at dinner, she asks what your priorities are right now. You answer. A week passes. She asks what matters most to you in life. On the surface, these are 3 different questions. Beneath the surface, they're the same question asked 3 ways. She's trying to understand if she fits into your future, your present, and your value system. She's mapping compatibility across time and priority. If you answer each question in isolation, you've missed the through line. If you recognize the through line, you can address it. You might say, I notice these questions all circle around the same thing. You're trying to figure out if what I want matches what you want. Instead of dancing around it, why don't we just talk about that directly? This level of directness does something powerful. It respects her intelligence while calling out her indirectness. It shows you're not afraid of real conversation. It demonstrates confidence in your ability to handle whatever that conversation reveals. Most men avoid this directness because they're afraid of the answer. That fear is what keeps them stuck in surface-level connections. Nietzsche said that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. If your why for being with someone is genuine compatibility and mutual investment, you can bear the how of direct conversation about feelings and intentions. If your why is just avoiding loneliness or proving your worth, direct conversation feels terrifying because it might expose the shaky foundation. Let me tell you about a client named Eric. He came to me frustrated because women kept losing interest after a few months. He couldn't figure out why. He was attentive, responsive, always available. He thought he was doing everything right. I asked him to record a few conversations. I listened. The pattern was immediately obvious. Women would ask him questions, and he'd give thorough, logical answers. But he never acknowledged the emotional undercurrent. He never addressed what they were really asking. One woman asked him 3 separate times if he liked spending time with her friends. He kept saying yes, they're nice people. What she actually wanted to know was whether he was integrating into her life or keeping her compartmentalized. He never addressed that real question, so she felt perpetually uncertain about his level of commitment. I worked with Eric on reading repetition as a signal, not a redundancy. Within 2 weeks, his interactions changed completely. Women started opening up more. Conversations went deeper. The connections lasted longer. Nothing changed except his ability to see what was actually being communicated. This is what I want for you. Not a bag of tricks. Not manipulation tactics. Actual literacy in how attraction and investment communicate themselves indirectly. Hobbes wrote that the condition of man is a condition of war of everyone against everyone. In relationships, that war is often a war of vulnerability. Who reveals first? Who admits investment first? Who takes the emotional risk first? Understanding repeated questions helps you see that she's already taken the risk. She's already revealed investment. She's just done it in code. Your move isn't to punish that revelation. Your move is to honor it by responding with calibrated awareness. You see what she's doing. You appreciate the courage it takes to ask indirectly because direct asking feels too exposed. You give her enough confirmation to feel safe, not so much that she feels certain. Safety without certainty is the zone where attraction grows. Let's talk about 3 common mistakes men make even after they start recognizing the pattern. First mistake, pointing it out mockingly. She asks the same question, and he says, "Wow, ask me that again, why don't you?" The mockery feels like punishment for showing interest, which makes her retreat and guard herself more carefully next time. Second mistake, over-answering to prove attentiveness. He thinks if he gives her an incredibly detailed response, she'll feel satisfied and stop asking. But she doesn't want more information. She wants emotional resonance. Detail without resonance just feels like a lecture. Third mistake, using the repetition as leverage. He notices the pattern and thinks, now I have power. I know she cares more than she's saying. He starts pulling back or playing games to test how much she'll chase. This backfires because it transforms a natural dynamic into a power struggle, which destroys trust. The right approach is simple. Notice the pattern. Acknowledge it kindly. Address the real question when appropriate. Maintain your own boundaries and standards while respecting hers. This isn't complicated. It just requires you to pay attention to behavior, not just words. Cialdini's principle of reciprocity applies here. When she invests through repeated questions, you invest through perceptive responses. When she shows care through monitoring your life, You show care through understanding her motivations. Reciprocity builds connection. Imbalance builds resentment. Here's a question I get often. What if she's asking repeated questions because she's controlling or insecure, not because she's invested? Fair question. The difference is in the tone and frequency. Invested repetition is curious and seeking connection. Controlling repetition is interrogative and seeking compliance. Invested, what are you up to tonight? Asked with genuine interest, wanting to feel included. Controlling, what are you up to tonight? Asked with suspicion, wanting to monitor behavior. You can feel the difference. Trust your gut. If the questions feel warm, even if repetitive, that's investment. If they feel cold, invasive, accusatory, that's insecurity or control. Respond to investment with openness. Respond to control with boundaries. Never confuse the two. Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Women who ask repeated questions are being directed by unconscious investment they haven't made conscious yet. Your job isn't to force that investment into consciousness prematurely. Your job is to create the conditions where she feels safe making it conscious herself. How do you create those conditions? First, consistency. She needs to know that your answers won't change based on your mood. If you're warm one day and cold the next, she'll keep asking questions to figure out which version of you is real. Consistency allows her to trust that what she sees is what she gets. Second, non-reactivity. When she asks the same question, your response should be calm regardless of whether this is the first or fifth time. Reactivity signals that her behavior affects you negatively, which introduces shame. Shame kills vulnerability. Non-reactivity keeps the door open. Third, measured revelation. Don't tell her everything at once. Don't wall yourself off completely. Find the middle path. Share things gradually. Let her discovery feel earned. People value what they work for. If you're an open book from day one, there's nothing left to discover by day 30. Machiavelli advised that it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. In attraction, adapt this. It's better to be intriguing than available if you cannot be both. Intrigue maintains attention. Availability can breed contempt if offered without discernment. Now let me show you how to identify false positives. Sometimes women ask repeated questions for reasons other than investment. First scenario. She asks the same question because she's genuinely not listening. She's distracted, multitasking, or disinterested. How do you tell? Her eyes, her body language. If she's engaged when you answer, it's investment. If she's scrolling through her phone, it's disinterest. Second scenario. She asks repeated questions to fill awkward silence. She's nervous, not curious. How do you tell? The questions are generic and don't build on your previous answers. Invested questions go deeper each time. Nervous questions stay surface level. Third scenario. She asks the same things because she's interviewing multiple men and can't remember who she asked what. This is rare, but it happens. How do you tell? Her responses to your answers lack continuity. She doesn't reference things you told her previously. This indicates you're not occupying significant mental space. In all three false positive scenarios, the solution is the same. Pull back, invest your energy elsewhere. Don't waste time analyzing disinterest. The beauty of the repeated question signal is that genuine investment is unmistakable when you know what to look for. Let me address the men who are thinking, this is too much effort. I just want someone who communicates directly. I understand that desire, but here's reality. Direct communication is a skill that develops over time within a relationship built on trust. Expecting it from day one is unrealistic. Women who communicate directly from the start are either exceptionally self-aware, which is rare, or they're not actually invested yet, which makes directness easy because there's no risk. The women who communicate indirectly early on are often the ones capable of deeper investment, which is exactly what makes them cautious. Schopenhauer taught that life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. Direct communication from someone not invested is boring. Indirect communication from someone genuinely invested is challenging but rewarding. Choose your challenge wisely. Here's a framework I use with clients. I call it the 3-question rule. If she asks you the same core question 3 times across 3 separate conversations, she's invested. Once could be curiosity. Twice could be coincidence. 3 times is a pattern, and patterns reveal priorities. When you hit that 3rd repetition, that's your moment. That's when you gently call it out. That's when you shift from surface conversation to real conversation. That's when you separate yourself from every other man who's missing what's happening. Let me walk you through exactly what to say. She asks for the 3rd time about your weekend plans, your relationship history, your future goals, whatever the topic is. You pause. You make eye contact. You say, I notice this keeps coming up for you. What's really on your mind? 9 out of 10 times, she'll deflect initially. She'll laugh, say nothing specific, claim she's just making conversation. Don't push. Just nod and say, okay, well, if there's something you want to know, you can ask me directly. I'm not going to judge you for being curious. That last sentence is crucial. You're giving her permission to be direct without fear of punishment. Most women have been shamed for showing too much interest, asking too many questions, or seeming too invested. You're removing that shame. You're creating safety. What happens next tells you everything. If she's genuinely invested, she'll eventually drop the indirect approach and ask you what she really wants to know. If she's not actually invested and was just making conversation, she'll move on to other topics and stop repeating that question. Either outcome gives you clarity. Clarity allows you to make informed decisions about where to invest your time and energy. This is the opposite of manipulation. This is efficiency through understanding. Epictetus said we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. Listen to the repetition. Listen to the patterns. Listen to what she returns to when the conversation could go anywhere. Those returns are maps to her inner world. I coached a man named Kyle last month. He was seeing a woman who kept asking about his relationship with his family. He'd answer. She'd ask again a week later from a different angle. After the 4th time, Kyle finally said, You're really trying to understand my family dynamics. Why does that matter to you? She paused, then admitted she grew up in a broken home and was trying to figure out if he had the family values she wanted in a partner. That admission changed everything. They went from surface dating to deep compatibility conversation in 1 moment of awareness. That's what reading the signal does. It accelerates intimacy by removing the need for prolonged guessing. You're not forcing intimacy. You're recognizing when someone is ready for it and giving them permission to go there. Let me synthesize everything into a practical system you can use immediately. Step 1. Track the questions she asks you over a 2-week period. Don't analyze yet. Just notice. Keep a mental or physical note of topics she brings up more than once. Step 2. Identify which questions repeat 3 or more times. These are your high signal indicators. These reveal what she's actually trying to understand about you and your compatibility. Step 3. The 3rd time a question repeats, acknowledge the pattern. Use the language I gave you earlier. Stay calm, stay curious, stay non-judgmental. Create space for honesty. Step 4. Based on her response to your acknowledgement, calibrate your next move. If she opens up, meet her vulnerability with your own. If she deflects, respect that and give her more time. Never force revelation. Step 5. Regardless of her response, maintain the behaviors that attracted her in the first place. Don't become more available just because you've confirmed her investment. Don't become less available to test her. Stay consistent with who you actually are. This system works because it's built on reading reality, not creating it. You're not manufacturing attraction. You're recognizing attraction that already exists and responding to it intelligently. Robert Greene wrote that the greatest power is the power to choose your battles. In relationships, choose to battle miscommunication, not the person. When you see her repeated questions as miscommunication rather than annoyance, you transform the dynamic entirely. Now I want to address something important for long-term success. This signal, the repeated question, is most prominent in early-stage dating. As relationships develop and trust deepens, communication typically becomes more direct. If you're 6 months in and she's still asking everything indirectly, that's a different issue. That's potentially avoidance of intimacy or fear of vulnerability that needs to be addressed. But in weeks 3 through 12, indirect communication through repeated questions is normal, healthy, and actually a positive sign. It means she cares enough to gather information, but feels uncertain enough to protect herself while doing it. That's the sweet spot of developing investment. Freud understood that defense mechanisms protect the ego from perceived threats. Her indirect questions are an ego defense. She's protecting herself from the threat of rejection or premature vulnerability. As you prove yourself trustworthy through consistent behavior and perceptive responses, those defenses naturally lower. Your goal isn't to break down her defenses. Your goal is to be worthy of her lowering them herself. There's a massive difference. Breaking down defenses creates trauma. Being worthy of lowered defenses creates trust. Let me leave you with 3 final principles. First principle: behavior reveals truth more reliably than words. When her behavior shows repeated interest in specific aspects of your life, believe the behavior. The words might say, just curious. The behavior says you matter. Second principle: investment grows through perceived scarcity and proven value. If you're always available, always answering immediately, always accommodating, you remove scarcity. If you're distant, cold, or dismissive, you remove value. The balance is being valuable while maintaining your own life and boundaries. Third principle: attraction is built on understanding, not agreement. You don't need to agree with how she communicates. You just need to understand it. When you understand her communication style, you can navigate it effectively without frustration. Sun Tzu taught that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. In relationships, the supreme art is to build connection without force. You cannot force someone to invest emotionally. You can only create conditions where investment feels natural and safe. The repeated question is her way of creating those conditions for herself. She's gathering information to determine safety. Your awareness of that process, your respect for it, and your calibrated responses to it demonstrate that yes, you are safe. Yes, you understand her. Yes, investing in you is a wise decision. I started this video telling you about a signal most men miss. Now you understand it's not just a signal. It's a window into how female psychology processes investment, risk, and vulnerability. It's a tool for building genuine connection based on mutual understanding rather than mutual performance. Take what you learned here and apply it immediately. The next time a woman asks you the same question twice, pay attention. The third time, acknowledge it. Watch what happens. You'll be amazed how quickly surface interactions transform into real connection. This channel exists to give you the psychological tools that most men never access. Tools rooted in dark psychology, evolutionary biology, and behavioral science. Not theory, not opinion. Pattern recognition that changes outcomes. If this resonated with you, subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown. Comment below and tell me about a time you missed this signal. What happened? How would you handle it differently now? I read every comment and I'll respond to the most insightful ones. Remember, the game isn't about winning her over through deception. It's about recognizing when you've already won through genuine attraction, then maintaining the behaviors that created that attraction in the first place. She's already invested. The repeated questions prove it. Now you know how to honor that investment without collapsing the mystery that makes it grow. Until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and keep building the life that makes you worth investing in. The right woman won't need convincing when you're living at your highest potential. She'll recognize your value and show you through every repeated question that she sees it too. This is Apex Masculine Mind. Welcome to the select few who understand how this actually works.